Digression. One thing I learned pretty quickly at high school was that it doesn't pay to be honest, to be yourself. I already learned to play the game at public school, but at high school they stuck it to me really good. The thing was, they'd ask you questions, but they didn't listen to you. They weren't interested in what you said. Why ask a question if you don't care what the answer is? What the teachers really wanted you to do was guess what they wanted you to answer, and if you guessed correctly, not that that was hard, you were right. But it took me a little while to learn that. For instance, our grade 9 history teacher, Miss Wass, once said to us, "Now, class, I want you people to use your brains today to solve a big problem. Imagine you're all shipwrecked on an island with no adults around. It's a tropical island outside the shipping lanes, so it doesn't look like you'll be rescued for a long time, if at all. You must organize yourself in some way. How would you begin?" We all sat around a minute looking mystified. Nobody put up their hand. But I remembered this interesting book I'd read a year or so before called Lord of the Flies, and I thought I had a pretty good idea. I put up my hand. Stupid me, thinking she was really interested in my opinion. I started telling her about the novel, and that since there were no adults around, we kiddies would have to form a government and democracy wouldn't work because we were immature and uneducated and blah blah blah. And I ended up suggesting a dictatorship that'd be temporary, and then she interrupted. "Thank you, Franklin, that will do for a start. Now, class, let's go back for a moment." Surprised that she interrupted me, I sat down, beaming and smiling, hoping that my answer was really good and thinking this was one teacher who might actually like me. But then I looked in her face. It was clouded with anger, although she tried to hide it. My smile disappeared, and a hot, fast wave rolled over me. I felt wounded and embarrassed. I'd ruined her lesson by jumping ahead and running through the ideas she had wanted us all to struggle with, all period, as she led us from point to point. We were supposed to end up where she wanted us to, ready to begin a study of government in ancient Greece. I realized all this in a split second of agonizing humiliation. When I was leaving at the end of the period, she said, "You know, Franklin, it isn't necessary to try to impress me by telling everything you know." The same kind of thing happened in French a couple of days later. Our teacher would ask for volunteers to go up to the board, and I'd stick up my mitt every time. After a couple of times, he didn't ask me anymore because what was he doing was get kids to put up answers he hoped would be incorrect, so he could use them to teach us really earth shaking stuff like not getting le and la mixed up, all the while making sarcastic remarks. So it didn't pay to be right there either. After that, I started to check out all my teachers and realized all they wanted the class to do was go along with their plan for the lesson. That is, those who had a plan. And some of them, like Beaker Baker, the chem guy, just hemmed and hawed and rambled all period. They all asked a lot of questions, but like I said, none of them were really interested in what you said. And the last thing they wanted was for you to think. But if you do think about it, the school is stupid and ass backward anyways. The people who know the answers ask the questions, and the people who don't know the answers ask the questions. So, anyways, we all made an unspoken truce. I minded my business and wrote their stupid tests and did equally stupid assignments, most of them, and got by with dandy marks. During class, I'd watch the movie behind my eyes or read using the old book inside a text trick. I played their game and won all kinds of pints and prizes and crap that I secretly hated, but nobody asked me what I thought of them. That went on for a few years until I got Peters for grade 12 English. He woke me up again. He walked into class the first day, all packed full of importance and plans, obviously a new teacher, and said, "Now let's get something straight, class. You are here to learn to think, not to memorize Shakespeare or draw plot graphs or expect me to give you all the answers. If you're an intellectual slob or mentally sloppy, I'll come down on you like a big truck. If you try to think your way along and take an active part in class discussions, I'll see that you get an English credit. Now let's get started." Of course, everybody figured this was baloney, and few of the guys tried to make it hard for the new teacher. But Peters ended their nonsense pretty quickly. After a couple of weeks went by, the kids were still shell shocked, wondering why this guy did everything differently. One day he said, "Crabbe, stick around after class is over." I did. While the next class was filing into the room, he said, with the machine gun delivery of his, "Look, Crabbe, I'm disappointed in you. I've read your essay and I've read your file at the guidance office. You write like a poet and your IQ is higher than mine, which is 150. Not that I believe in IQs much." I want you to get off your butt and do something contributing in this class. You should be one of the leaders and you just sit there reading everything but what you're supposed to do. I want a change, starting tomorrow, understand? Yes, sir. Good, now get to class or you'll be late. Then he smiled. Peters was like that. He liked to talk. He talked like a tough guy, but he read poems like you were sure he was going to cry. And he always managed to slip a compliment into his talk to you. You didn't notice until later, but then it made you feel good. If a kid made a mistake in class, Peters always managed to make the kid feel good about the goof. He'd say something like, "If you knew all the answers, you wouldn't need me or this school, would you?" I'll bet they hated him in the staff room. He always needed a haircut. He wore the goofiest looking baggy clothes you've ever seen, draped over his 5'2" frame. His tie was dirty and wrinkled, and he wore a cardigan rather than a sports coat or suit jacket. And he had 3 or 4 pairs of fancy pointy toed cowboy boots. He was always dropping books on his rapid, commotion filled transit down the halls. I swear he actually slid around corners. I'll bet they hated him in the staff room because every time he went in there, stepping over all the old bones and dead wood, he'd remind them just by being there that they were all dead and what they were doing was a hoax, draining all the creativity out of us. Peters was like one of those machines we played with in physics where you'd wind a handle and wheels would turn and then a spark would jump between two metal balls. He always charged up and his energy jumped into his students. My father thought Peters was a dangerous man who would undermine the school, and in a way he was right, but for the wrong reasons. My father's criticism was based on the clothing. Peters did threaten the system. He made us think, and nobody wants a thinker. Thinkers are irritating and troublesome, and they don't fit in. Our school wanted everything to be smooth, and I had to be going along with them all these years. Peters made me break the truce. I began to ask myself again and again about my future, and eventually I decided to cut out of the herd. The thing with teaching people to think is that you never know where they'll end up.